Namaskar, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to invite everyone for this first ever Indica conference on Hindu arts, architecture, and artisan traditions. It is a subject that has been very close to my heart personally and to the heart of everyone at Indica. And this is largely a labor of love. I've had a huge learning curve in going through the papers, in deciding what to take and what not to take. And I have tremendous respect for all the scholars who have participated in this conference and the topics that they have chosen. Just reading the abstracts of those topics was a huge, tremendous learning curve for me. Because we all know that in India, arts, architecture, and artisan traditions are not meant for the sake of art itself. They are meant as an offering to the divine. And this is what we have seen in our scriptures. This is what we have seen in the day to day activities of our artists. I have gone to many places, many weaving clusters, many arts and craft clusters. And when I've seen artisans at work, there has always been this feeling of dedication, this feeling that this is not just a job I'm doing, but that this is an offering that I'm doing. My art is an offering. I am Vishwakarma's child, and my art is an offering to the divine, is the feeling that we have even today. And it does not matter if, in the course of time, the people practicing these arts have changed their faith. They are not worshipping probably the same gods that they used to worship. But this feeling that the loom is Lakshmi is the same regardless of what is the faith of people. And I've seen that. I've seen that in Muslim weavers also, who treat the loom as Barkat. And they also have their own version of looking after the loom. And there are rituals everywhere. In Odisha, for example, in Gopalpur, there is a festival called on the day of Ghoda Navami, where all the children in the village, they make straw horses and they do the puja to the looms. And the first Naivedyam is offered to the loom. That day, no weaving takes place. That day, the loom is given rest because the loom is treated as Lakshmi. And every article that is woven by the weavers is an offering to that Lakshmi. Years ago, when we built our own house in Pune, we had a carpenter who was from Rajasthan. And every single day when he started work, before he started work, he would put all his implements in a line, put a flower on them, and just stand in silence for about a minute or so with folded hands every single day before he started work. And on Amavasya, he didn't work because he said that that was a rest day and that was the day they do Vishwakarma Puja. That's when I realized that this tradition of worshipping Vishwakarma and doing everything that you're doing as an offering to the divine and the spiritual basis to Hindu art, architecture, sculpture, and artisan traditions is very much alive today, despite so many disruptions in our political scenario, despite the colonial rule, despite so many assaults on our traditions. And that is a thing that we still carry. And you see that everywhere. So even today, when you go to Kanchipuram to do wedding shopping, most of the weavers and even the big shops in Kanchipuram, they'll have a small temple in their store. And when the bride and groom go there for their wedding shopping, when their clothes are finally chosen, the weaver or the owner of that shop will do a small puja, a small ritual kind of a thing. They will bless those clothes and they will offer those clothes to the bride and groom. The feeling is we are clothing it to you. It's not just as a good and auspicious thing. And we hope that this article of clothing that we have woven with love and devotion will bring you the same kind of happiness. And that sort of feeling is there everywhere. Even today, we have sculptors, we have stapatis. Before they start any new job, before they start carving any new murti, and of course you will learn about it later as we see the papers, they will pray in front of the block of wood or block of stone before even touching their implements. That is the sort of faith and reverence that our artists, artisans, tapatis, sculptors have for their work even today. And it's remarkable. Nowhere else in the world would you see a traditional sculptural, a cultural capital like this that we have in India, which is reflected in art even today. And you see that in pretty much everything, even the articles that are used for our everyday use, even the strictly utilitarian articles like quilts, like brooms, like the mortar and pestle, even those things, nobody really looks at them as works of art, right? But if you go to the traditional artists, and if you see a lady in a village who is doing the quilt, you will see that she's not just doing it as a utilitarian object. She's doing it as a labor of love. It's a story she's telling. So the way she'll put those old pieces of sari together, there is a certain aesthetic behind it. There is a certain feeling of, this is what I'm offering as an act of love for my family. This is an act of love. This is an act of devotion to the divine. That feeling is there everywhere. Recently, I went to Odisha and I saw brooms there selling outside a temple. These are ordinary brooms, okay, which people use to clean their houses. They don't have to be a thing of beauty. In cities, you don't find beautiful brooms. Nowadays, when you see buy custom made brooms from factories, they're not beautiful and nobody wants them to be beautiful either. But when you go to a village, you will find that even the brooms are woven in such a way that the top of the broom has got a definite pattern. It's got a definite beauty to it. And that is what dharma is. Dharma is doing everything that you do, creating everything that you create as an act of worship, as an act of offering to the divine. And that is why it is sacred. That is why it is an act of worship. And you see that in our weaves, you see that in the jewelry that we make, you see that obviously in temple architecture and the murtis that we make, you see that in the way spaces are planned, in the way our architecture is planned, you see that in how our clothes are woven, you see that in the rangoli that we draw every day outside our houses, you see that in every article that Indians have been creating traditionally, and considering themselves Indian artisans as Vishwakarma's children, and that everything that they do has got a scriptural basis to it. It's a journey from secular to the sacred. Everything is not what it seems. The broom is not just a broom. It is an implement to basically turn your spaces clean, to ensure that you're moving from uncleanliness to cleanliness, from darkness to light, and therefore it is an offering made to divine. Stella Kremrich had talked about it. I'm going to quote her. She describes the ways of Indian craftsmen in the following words. She says the Indian craftsman conceives of his art not as his own, nor as the accumulated skill of ages, but as originating in the divine skill of Vishwakarma and revealed by him. This is how our sacred texts, the Agamas, the Puranas, the Shilpa Shastras, the Vastu Shastras, trace the tradition of craftsmen back to Vishwakarma, the fountainhead of all knowledge. The awareness of this tradition exists even today among our artists, sculptors, tapatis, weavers, artisans, even performing artists. All creative work is offered as a sacred offering to the divine. And in all parts of India, that's why to this day, all the craftsmen worship their tools on Ayudha Puja day before Vijayadashmi, and they perform Vishwakarma Puja on Vishwakarma Jayanti. And it's not just the material that you use to make your craft that is considered as sacred, but both the materials as well as the tools of the craft are considered to be sacred. The tree which is to be felled by the carpenter or the sculptor to do his work is propitiated first with offerings. He lays his hand on it with a mantra asking pardon of the spirits residing in the tree. Only then that the wood is cut. The loom that the weaver uses is worshipped and offerings are made to it before a ceremonial textile for a wedding or a puja is taken up for weaving. Before a craftsman, sculptor, weaver or artisan takes up his tools for new assignments, all the instruments are worshipped with incense, flowers and offerings of food. The tools are considered to be the extension of the artisan's hand, the means by which he transforms elements from nature into a work of art that is not just an end by itself, but that work of art is an offering to the divine. This kind of tradition is not there anywhere in the world. I'll end with an anecdote. Years ago, more than 20-25 years ago, at that time, I was not as well read in our scriptures or in the civilization knowledge that we have of this own country. But I was in Rome, I was alone, and I was going through the sculpture galleries, and I was at Uffizi and marveling at David, which everybody knows is a monumental sculpture. And even when I was doing that, there was this thought in my mind that if an Indian traditional Stapati had to interpret this story of David, how would he how would he visualize, or how would he perceive David, and how would his David be? Would it be very different from the way the David was created and seen in that gallery? Would it have a completely different facial expression? Would it have a completely different stance? Would the ornamentation be different? How would it be? And around that time, I got to know a local sculptor, Italian sculptor, and he was also traveling alone. So we started talking. We got quite friendly. And after the visit to the Uffizi, we were having coffee in a small cafe near the gallery. And he had been to India. So I asked him this question, that how do you perceive Indian art? You are trained in contemporary art in your country. So he smiled at me and he said, your art is very religious. So I just looked at him incredulously and said, what did we see in the Uffizi so far? All the paintings of Madonna and the Child and all the statues, they are also religious, whether they be of Roman gods or Greek gods or Christian gods. So your art is also religious. He said, no, that's not what I mean. I mean to say that our gods look human. Your gods don't look human. So I told him, our gods are not meant to look human, because our gods are meant to look like gods. That is why they have ornaments. That is why they have ayudas. That is why they have all the features that the murtis are supposed to have. And that is a fundamental difference between the way our sculpture or our art exists as opposed to the way the Western world sees art. The Western world, especially the contemporary Western world, sees art as the creative expression of an individual artist, and it ends there. It doesn't have to have a greater purpose. The work of art is an end in itself. But when a traditional stapati or a traditional sculptor or a traditional weaver in India creates something out of his accumulated knowledge, the manifested article is not an end in itself. It is a symbol of so many things that are unmanifested, which is why all the motifs used are sacred. All the motifs have a meaning. The way things are done in a certain way, it has a meaning. And there is so much that is still unsaid than what you see actually in front of your eyes. And that, I think, to me, I'm not a scholar, but that to me is the fundamental difference between Hindu art, architecture and artisan traditions, and the Western way people perceive art. This conference is a way to find that, to explore those roots, those scriptural roots of our art, and to understand for ourselves, what does it really mean to have Hindu arts, architecture and artisan traditions. It is something that the layperson has forgotten, not the practitioners. The practitioners are still very rooted, but it is something that modern Indians have forgotten. It is time that we reacquainted ourselves to the basis behind our art and try to understand the bigger picture, try to understand what it really means to create art. Thank you so much for listening to me so patiently. And now I request the curator of this conference, Sri Nagraj Paturi ji, to talk about the idea behind this conference. Thank you so much.